Here is how Friday shapes up for the Big Ten, Northwestern, and Florida Atlantic. Not just the first game for the Big Ten, it's the first game in the country. It tips off just after noon in Brooklyn. The other three games are in the evening. Nebraska battles Texas A&M. That one just before 7 Eastern. Purdue's game about a half hour after that in Indy. And Wisconsin closes things out where it begins. Also in Brooklyn, they will take on James Madison. Ray Fell's back with me. We were talking a little bit of X factors with the teams that are playing tomorrow. Want to continue that theme, but really drive it home here. Let's start with Northwestern. Everyone knows about Boo Buie. He is clearly their superstar. He's the straw that stirs the drink. Who else needs to be good for the Wildcats, starting with that game against FAU?
Yeah, you could say Ryan Langborg, you could say Brooks Barnheiser. Those are the three guys that really make them go. But I'm looking at Nick Martinelli, understanding that there's no Matt Nicholson to deal with Golden inside for Northwestern defensively. And then also without Matt Nicholson, you lose some point production inside. You lose those twos that Northwestern has been able to get all season long. Nick Martinelli playing that 4 spot, he could be that Swiss Army knife. He can guard out on the perimeter, but he'll be able to take some of those FAU guards, some of those perimeter players down into the post with that old school, non-traditional game. Coach Weber likes to call it that little flipper doodle that he does over his head. I think if he can go in and get him 14 to 16 points, 8 to 10 rebounds, get to the free throw line like he's been known to do, I think that really helps their offense sink in, because I expect Boo, Ryan, and Brooks to be hooked up on the outside, but they're going to need somebody to compete inside.
Part of the challenge for them has been, as the roster has been depleted due to injuries, everyone's been able to focus a little more on the guys who can score, and there are essentially 5 guys who can score 15, 20 points any given night. He is one of them. But you look at the last 9 games, he's been in single figures 7, or I should say under 50% shooting 7 of those 9 games, and he's a 50% shooter on the year. So he's been below average for him in 7 of those 9 games. Can they get him going? You mentioned Langborg. I mean, Langborg was unbelievable in the NCAA tournament last year. He led Princeton to the Sweet 16. So he's another guy that you would look at and say perhaps he can get it going. It'll be interesting, too, and with Martinelli, I mean, Vlad Golden's a 7-footer, and so we know that about FAU. But other than that, this is not a tall team at all.
Exactly.
So Martinelli will probably have a height advantage on whoever guards him, as long as he's not playing a small ball 5.
No, I agree with you. And defensively, he's a guy that is about 6'8", 6'9", that can guard out a perimeter. He can keep those guys out of the teeth of the defense defensively. And then Northwestern, Coach Collins, they're going to go to Martinelli. They're going to see that matchup, whether it be Martinelli or Brooks Barnheiser, and they're going to attack it. I expect Johnell Davis to be on Boo Buie, and Johnell is normally their 3 or their 4. So at times, you're going to have smaller guys playing against Martinelli, and when he has them down there, when Brooks has them down there, it's got to be back to the basket. It's got to be nose to the rim. It can't be those little fadeaway jump shots, a little off of one leg. They got to put their nose to the rim and go get to the free throw line. If this is a game where Northwestern could get FAU into the bonus around an 8-9 mark in that first half, and then now you got Boo Buie attacking the rim, getting 1-and-1s every time he's touched, that'll really help them. If they can win the free throw game, they can win the rebounding game. If they can compete in that area and then make it a possession game. They want this game to be close with about 3-4 minutes to go, and then it's Boo Buie time. But I think Nick Martinelli, when we've seen times where Boo Buie struggle and Northwestern still be in the game as of late, it's been Nick Martinelli, it's been Brooks Barnheiser, it's been those guys not just producing, but getting to the free throw line and stacking up fouls on guys like Gold and guys like Johnell Davis. I think that'll speak volumes to what they could do.
Well, as we know, Northwestern's never lost an opening round game.
There we go.
NCAA tournament. Undefeated, 2-0
yes,
all time. Nebraska has never won one, unfortunately. The Huskers will be looking for their first NCAA tournament win. They open up, as we know, against Texas A&M. Both the men and the women do, which is kind of crazy. Who is the X factor for Nebraska?
Mr. Consistency, Bryce Williams. You look at Nebraska and how you plan for them. You look at Keisei Tominaga. You look at Rink Mass, Juwan Gary, and then you realize Bryce Williams is a guy that's been in double figures more times this season than anybody else on that roster. He's a guy at 6'7", 220, playing that 2-guard position that can score the ball from the perimeter. He can make shots. He can play in the mid-range. He can get to the free throw line, finish at the rim. But I think he's the X factor in this game when it comes to rebounding. When you play against when you play against a team like Texas A&M, they're going to fight you on the glass. They're going to go get offensive rebounds, play after play, offensive rebounding, 42% of their misses.
Crazy.
A guy like Bryce Williams being 6'7" at the two-guard position can go in and clean it up. You got Rink Mask, you got Josiah Alec, you got Juwan Gary. Those guys' job are to hit and block out. And then you look at Bryce Williams. Normally, guards don't crash offensively. They normally get back and play some transition defense. I think Bryce Williams will be able to come in the game, clean up those defensive rebounds, and use those rebounds to get out and push the break. I think that's going to be key for Nebraska to take care of the defensive rebounds. If they can get Casey in there, Bryce Williams in there to steal some, it'll really help them.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how this team plays emotionally. That's the other thing to me. I wonder whether that can be an X factor for them. You got to know how to harness it, though, right? I mean, you would know far better than I would, but it just feels like enough is enough with this narrative. Enough is enough with we never won a game. The Trev Alberts thing has to add a little bit of fuel to the fire, right? I mean, so I ask you, like, how can you turn that into a positive?
Well, one thing about players in the locker room, especially those young guys, they probably don't even know who Trev Alberts is. They don't even know what's going on. When you're on a team,
that's more of a fan thing.
That's more of a fan thing. Things that's actually guys knowing what's going on around the program. But when you're in the locker room, you don't care. You care about the guys around you. You care about the coach. You know what's going on right now. You know what's going on in that email that you got sent on Sunday. It's going to tell you what you got to do that week. That's what you care about, especially if you're dealing with classes and all that. But you got a team in Nebraska, they're older, they're more mature, and then they appreciate it. I talked to Josiah Alec after the game in the Big Ten tournament, talked to his parents. He appreciates the moment. He appreciates being in Nebraska, being a hometown kid, and winning a game for his university. I think Nebraska is going to approach this in a great way where they have guys that's never been here. You think Keisei Tominaga, not only did he come from Japan, he went and spent time in junior college. And a lot of guys don't understand.
In the middle of nowhere, by the way.
How hard junior college is.
Yeah.
And for Keisei Tominaga to burst through junior college, become a college basketball star, be in this position, be talked about on all the networks, to have these opportunities, I think this is going to be big game Keisei. You're going to get a tough Juwan Gary, Josiah Alec. That hair is going to be flying around. Rick Mass is going to have a good one. I expect Nebraska to be going full throttle.
I do, too. I think Nebraska's going to play well.
Yeah, I think they're going to shoot it well. Yep.
Let's get to Purdue. Let's get to the elephant in the room, which is Purdue has not performed well recently in NCAA tournaments, 3 straight losses to double-digit seeds. Not even focusing so much on the first game because we won't know who they're playing until tonight, but just more big picture. Everyone knows about Zach Edey. He's going to be the focus for Purdue because he always is. I mean, they've built their team around Zach Edey. But he's going to be the focus for everyone else as well. So I think the X factor applies to them maybe more than anyone else, where the X factor's got to play well. Who is it?
And normally you don't want to say the X factor is one of your best players, but I think it's got to be Braden Smith. You go back to last season in the tournament, Braden Smith, 7.7 turnovers, a game that he wants to forget about. But Braden Smith this season has been phenomenal. He's been sensational in all facets of the words. He's sharing the basketball at a high rate. He's shooting it well from deep. He's getting in that ball screen action, getting to that right hand. People are talking about Zach Edey right now in Purdue as if Braden Smith wasn't an honorable mention All-American guy, like he wasn't first team All-Big Ten. If Braden Smith is hooked up, if that leg is feeling good, and he's able to play in that ball screen, if he's confident getting guys involved in the game, there's nothing you're going to be able to do with Purdue. In the Big Ten tournament, they took that loss to Wisconsin. Braden was playing on one leg. If Braden is healthy, if he's into it mentally, he's playing in that ball screen, getting downhill, throwing that ball to the rim to Zach Edey, it's going to do nothing but take the pressure off of Fletcher Lawyer not to be able to knock down shots, and then it's going to open up the floor for Lance Jones to be able to play off the bounce. I think you go back to last season, when that shot clock would go down, when there was a few seconds left, they didn't have a guy to break down a defense one-on-one. Now you have Lance Jones to be able to go get his basket. Now you have Braden Smith extremely confident in the ball screen. I really like Purdue is, and I love how everyone's still sleeping on them. They got a lot more guys. And then even off the bench, you think Miles Colvin, Cam Heide, 2 athletes that can compete with anybody in the country. But Braden Smith, he's the guy. If he's having a good tournament, if he's out there balling, it's going to take Purdue not just to the Final Four, but to the national championship.
Can't turn it over. The average is nearly 3 per game. It's the 10th most of any player in the NCAA tournament. And if you look at common threads in their losses, turnovers have been a bit of an issue. And then I think just big picture, and you're saying it, they've got to shoot the ball well.
Got to make shots
from the perimeter. And when teams beat them, part of the equation is Zach Edey's going to get his. Can he make things really tough on those other guys? And Braden Smith is the head of the snake, as you would say. Finally, the X factor for Wisconsin.
Chucky Hepburn, my guy Chucky. He came into the Big Ten tournament and dominated offensively and defensively. I keep having visions and dreams of that defensive display that he put on Braden Smith at the end of that Wisconsin game. Turned him 3-4 times, getting up the court, ended up drawing a charge. It was just big time. And then offensively, Chucky played out of his mind. He was getting to the basket. He was posting up. He was shooting the mid-range. He was knocking down shots. He was just simply being aggressive. And when you get an aggressive Chucky Hepburn, it does wonders for Wisconsin. Their guards in the Big Ten tournament is what got them to the championship. It wasn't Tyler Wall. It wasn't Stephen Crowell. It was the play of Chucky, AJ, and Max. And when you get a hooked-up Chucky, I'll take him over RJ Davis. I'll take him over any guard that's coming from the ACC. You get to that Duke game, if you could take Jeremy Roach out of that basketball game, which I think Chucky can do defensively, and you think offensively, Chucky just attacking and not being a liability on that end of the floor, I think it's going to really take Wisconsin into that Sweet 16 game.
That, to me, is a huge part. The word you used, aggressive.
Yes.
In talking to Greg Gard this year, he said we want Chucky to be more aggressive. I think it's a balancing act, right? He was trying to figure it out because last year a lot of it came down to him.
Exactly.
They just couldn't really create a whole lot of offense. They were not a good shooting team at all, a really bad one, and it just felt like a lot of times it was Chucky in close game, shot clock winding down, and then I felt like at the beginning of the year he deferred a little bit, and now I think he's figured it out. And in fact, his last two games have been his two highest scoring games since the season opener.
Yes, and
right?
they've needed every single basket he's given them.
Yes, they
every
have.
Every single one.
All right, those are our X factors, but we still have more hoops to talk about. The dramatic conclusion of our show coming up next. We'll look back on last night's NIT action. Went quite well, thank you, for the Big Ten. Plus a few final thoughts straight ahead.